So I'm going to start this presentation by sharing with you what the survey is. It's only 9 questions. And this is the first question. So I'm going to go over what the 9 questions are and share some of the results that we've gathered so far. We did surveys last year through all of the trade associations, again mentioning Marble Institute, Building Stone Institute, a number of the other trade associations where this survey is going out for collection for you to help us complete and to provide information. So, are you regulated by MSHA or OSHA? Is there anyone here that is regulated by MSHA only? Okay, we got 1. So, 2. So there's 3 of us in the room that are primarily MSHA, the rest that are OSHA. So here's some of the results. Okay, so our total number of responses, there were 50. A number of them on the MSHA side versus the OSHA side, and there are some that are regulated by both. So they operate a quarry and they also have a processing facility, but the processing facility is strictly regulated by OSHA. Number 2, please rate the objectivity of the last inspection on a scale of 1 to 5. Number 1 being highly objective, number 5 being highly subjective. Okay, so this gets a little bit interesting. All right, here's some of the responses. Again, MSHA and OSHA, highly objective. And you can see there's a number of people that are answering the question in the middle of the road. So obviously this is saying that a lot of people are not per se having major issues. And there are a number of people, though, that are highly subjective, about 10, 11 of them that are middle of the road, 17, where they feel their inspections are objective. The third question, do you feel that the citations were warranted or unwarranted? Okay, everybody has an opinion about that. Here's our answers so far. 20 of them, like on MSHA, that are warranted, 6 on OSHA, versus unwarranted. I really can't say much about those that said not applicable. I would think, and we are kind of hoping that people will tell us if they felt that the citation was warranted or not. So I really can't say too much about there. But again, initially, you're seeing some stuff here where people are not per se disagreeing with the citation that they're getting. Here's some comments, though, that we're sharing with you that are interested. Okay, we were shut down for the winter, 2 people, and they got cited for ice coming off the roof. Some of these statements are where people are being either positive or negative. You know, we received 2 citations, both were warranted. Next one, citations 2 received, no fines, abated. 25% of citations were unwarranted. You can see that there is obviously a variation of experiences that people are having here, and that's what we want to point out. The fourth question. What was the primary focus of the inspection? Hazard training, noise. Here we're asking people just to tell us, was there a focus? A lot of times you'll get an inspection and there's not. A lot of times inspections may be more electrical, they may be other hazards, they may be other issues. But this will help us to kind of track themes or major issues throughout the country, and are they the same or are they different? And why, of course. Here's some of the answers, and they are all over the board, and the other 2 presenters will be going into a little bit more data. You can see on the MSHA side, most of it was hazard related. On the OSHA side, it's all over, from record keeping, travelways, noise, dust. Kind of the typical stuff. But I think this is interesting to kind of see because it helps you thinking about what your last inspection was. Is your experience similar or is it different? Number 5, please rate the attitude of the inspectors from professional to confrontational. I think this is an important question because everyone wants to be professional. This is a necessary part of running our businesses, right? But there have certainly been interesting comments on this side. Again, the ranking from professional to confrontational. Most of the time it's professional. Here's some of the comments, though. They try to be professional, but quickly or easily move to confrontational. Varies from inspector to inspector. The highest number of comments in this particular question, that's what we're seeing. Varies from inspector to inspector, because as you can imagine, the quality or the experience of an inspector may really affect the outcome of your inspection. Often a total lack of common sense and practical application. This is definitely a new theme. I've been regulated for almost 20 years, and this third comment is probably one of the most common comments that we're getting. We're starting to lose objectivity and practicality of what we're being asked to do to comply with the standard. That is probably one of the biggest issues that you hear about, and that is one of the biggest focuses for this organization to try to address, and that's why we need your help on getting more data. Number 6, please rate your attitude at the inspection. That can also have a very big impact. I see some shaking heads. What your attitude is, because if your attitude is not respectful and professional, you may have a worse outcome than you might have. Here's some of the answers. Everybody is saying that they're very professional, okay? Of course, we don't know what the other side may be thinking, but here's some of the answers. Everybody is saying, for the most part, that they're being professional. But we still thought if we're asking them about what they think about the regulator, we're asking them the same thing about themselves. Question number 7, if the inspection resulted in citation or citations, please list. We intentionally excluded because there are volumes. We're talking about 3 pages here. So what we really want to know this. We really want to know, in your opinion, maybe you only got 1 citation, maybe you got 6 or 10 or 12. You can either share all of that. What we want to know is the actual regulation that you were cited in. There are a lot of times errors when somebody is cited for something in a reg. And again, this helps us to kind of track information. It helps us to create a focus on what people are being cited for. But we did not provide all of that information, and the guys on the panel will be talking about that. Question number 8, did the inspector offer guidance or suggestions during the inspection? This is interesting too. Pretty much across the board. Yes, allowed small issues to be fixed instead of writing citations. That's wonderful. They must have had a wonderful cooperative inspection. Yes, many suggestions on how to improve safety. MSHA or OSHA, yes, gave MSDS. Another comment, inspector made a few suggestions, which were repaired, no citations. And then one of the last comments here, concern to catch us in a violation, very little concern with guidance. Number 5, in the last 5 years, MSHA no longer gives suggestions. What's happening here that you see these variations is that these variations are being created across the country. So some people are having more collaborative, positive, okay, I'm getting written up for something, but I'm also getting some helpful advice, and there are other people who are not. Okay, that's representing a pretty big inconsistency for federal agencies. And we want to see if we can at least share this data, advocate on this, and have a collaborative, cooperative, working relationship, basically, with the agencies. Okay, that is the list of the questions. Okay, the survey is obviously very small. Okay, this is not a long survey. It's 8 questions. Yeah, sorry, 8 questions. There's also an option for you to give comments. It is anonymous. Okay, you obtain the survey from your agency, from your trade association. You fill it out, you send it back to them, and then it gets forwarded on for collection and for a summary. If you want to tell us who you are, that's wonderful. That information is not going anywhere. So again, it's a very brief survey. It's created for it to not take a lot of your time. You can give us as much information about it or not that you want to. But the important part here is that if this committee is trying to advocate and trying to create a more collaborative relationship, if that can occur, we need information from you all. You guys are out there every day. People are getting inspected, okay? It really takes no more than 10 minutes of your time. So this data is incredibly important because we can't get it anywhere if we don't get it from you. Okay, so I'm going to pass it on next to Scott, who is our next presenter, to give you some valuable feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica, for everything that you've done. I know it's a lot of effort to put all this stuff together. So, some of you I recognize, and some of you I don't. So I'd like to introduce myself beyond the record. the introduction that I had. My name is Scott McKenna. This is me up on the screen with my two boys. Hunter is on the left. He's now 10. He'll be 11 in a few weeks. And then Tanner's on the right. He's 9. They're 14 months apart. We live in Warrensburg, New York. Does anyone know where Warrensburg, New York is? Besides you, James? No? Where are you from? Minneapolis. How are you? Good to see you. What do you do? Oh, yeah. Warrensburg is just north of Lake George, so we're about an hour north of Albany. And I own a company called Catamount Consulting. We do safety training, we do assistance with litigation work, we do pretty much anything you can think of in the ocean industry, the mining industries, the gas and oil industry. We work with underground mines, surface mines, so pretty much everything across the board. We got offices scattered around the Northeast, and we're putting in offices in other parts of the country. I also am a high school wrestling coach for Warrensburg. It's a small school. Both my boys wrestle, but I also coach the high school kids and the youth. We graduate about 50 kids a year, so I do that as well. From Thanksgiving time until now, we're still wrestling until a couple weeks from now, and the kids keep wrestling. But I'm currently married to one woman. We didn't push her off that embankment. She's actually still with us. And I'm currently married to one woman. And I say that because our governor seems to be making a lot of political changes, so I'm thinking that maybe polygamy may be coming into the mix. Runs on the list. I guess we're going to be able to get marijuana in New York. Who knows what's going to happen. But with all joking aside, it's...
Maybe you'll marry a guy.
Huh?
Maybe you'll marry a guy.
That's legal in New York too, Yeah, we got lots of changes going on, but
Didn't he tell you that you were not welcome there?
they haven't taken me out. No, they stay away from us in the North Country for the most part. But my wife is an elementary school teacher, so if anyone else here is married to an elementary teacher, it changes the way that you operate most of the time. Anyone else have an elementary teacher for a husband or a wife? No? It's different because you never really leave elementary school growing up in that environment. And I bring some of these things up as I talk about it in the different points that I want to make, and it's kind of important. And the first important thing that is interesting about being married to an elementary school teacher, which scares me a little bit about some of the people that are coming to work for you, and it should scare you, is that they have a full-time person in first grade, I had a lot of first graders in last year, teaching kids how to use the muscles to use crayons and pencils. It has nothing to do with mining, I understand that. But think about this for a minute. Their muscles are strong here. Their muscles cannot hold crayons and pencils. A little scary to me when we talk about safety and risk and behaviors and the things that are involved with everything that we're doing here. This, after all, is a safety presentation. So it'll come up in conversation, I'm sure, my wife and my children and what I do. So I want to make sure that I introduce myself in that fashion. And before I go on and take the show and don't provide an opportunity for Mark, I want to make sure that he introduces himself, because I certainly will not give you the justice that you will provide yourself.
No, I give myself injustice. I'm a little bit in a different position than Scott is. My name is Mark Sabat. I'm a lawyer. I work for law firm called Jackson Lewis. They tell you not to ever start with confessions or apologies, so I'll start with a confession and an apology. I used to work for MSHA. That was a very long time ago. They're all looking at me like I still part of the problem. Seriously, worked for them 5 years. I've been representing miners and mining companies since I left. That's been about 38 years. So 5 years with them, 38 years with you guys. I think I'm close, right? If I'm not, how about I once was lost but now I'm found? Is that okay? So I tried to get a picture with my kids. The problem I have is none of my kids would stay in the same place long enough for a picture with everybody. But I do have a picture of my granddaughter feeding my grandson, which I thought was one of the cooler things on the planet. She's 2.5 and he's about 8 months, and she really she's just enamored with him. Unfortunately, she lives in Salt Lake. He lives in Brooklyn. So I don't get to see each other very much, but when we get them together, and then there is me in that picture holding a fish that, and the person behind me is my youngest son. So that kind of tells a story about where I am. I'd rather be fishing probably than anything else. Where is it that we get together and do things? Scott and I do a lot of work together on a lot of things. One of the things you'll hear about later, I think there's some cards in here, is we try to help people handle MSHA and OSHA issues on their own without lawyers. Sounds strange coming from a lawyer, but the value proposition is that if there's no value in the lawyer taking legal fees to help you with stuff that you could probably get by on yourself, right? And ultimately that doesn't help the industry, doesn't help you, doesn't help anybody, so we try to do a lot of that stuff. And we can give you a flavor of that today. We can talk a little bit about safety and a little bit about compliance. Before we turn it back over to Scott just for a second. Oh, by the way, my wife was not an elementary school teacher. She used to work in national security. So if you're married to somebody who works in national security, you have a whole different set of problems. She once got a medal for blowing up a building. It wasn't a secret. Everybody knew it was going to get blown up. But it wasn't like sabotage. But I was at the medal ceremony, and they asked me if I had any remarks. And all I said was, could I please get a remote control for starting my car? So it's a different way of looking at life. Scott and I share a lot of things in common, but that is a big difference.
And their names are the same.
Yeah, they're both named Kim. So the other thing, by the way, that I want to say is, Scott's going to talk to you about safety. I'm going to talk to you about compliance. And that is a key concept in what we're going to talk about. Because safety and compliance are two different things. And I want to make sure everybody understands they're two different things. And then we can start to really make sense out of where we're coming from.
Yes. And secondary on that, there is no rhyme or reason really what we've got going on. This is for all of you that are here. So if there's something we got to spend time with, let's do it. We're looking at taking something that we spend at least 2.5 days dealing with folks like yourself and supervisors on how to organize all this and cracking it into an hour. All right, we aren't going anywhere after the session. Apparently there's free beer downstairs, so you can rest assured we'll be there. So later on we can talk more about it then. If there's something specific we got to talk about during the session, just holler out and let's talk about it. Making sure we understand some key components is the only way that you'll really be productive and be able to move forward in all of these topics, in our opinion. Right?
Yeah.
To sum it up a little bit.
No, if you have a question, ask it. This is the cheapest legal advice you're ever going to get.
Free beer is downstairs, and there are 3.5 kegs for 2 hours, right?
Yeah, it's called block party.
It's a block party.
Yeah, Mo will give you instructions.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Directions
show you
on
where to
how
go.
use
Right.
That's important. That's the only question we had so far.
Where's the beer?
I'm going to kind of take it over for just a couple of minutes here. This is really our entire presentation. That's it. It's that simple. When we take everything that we do and everything that you do, we think that it's just a big jargle of stuff that's in your head. And if you came to me and said, look, I run a company or I'm a supervisor of a company, what do I need to know to be productive? What do I need to know to be safe? What do I need to know to get more quality? Probably these things would come into one of those three components in our mind, somehow. All right? The backdrop of getting water poured on our head kind of to us feels like regulation on us, right? We're all sitting down there trying to picture, do the good thing. Mom says sit Indian style and pay attention and smile, and next thing you know, water's coming on us, so we understand the feeling. I personally am not a lawyer, and I work with industry to try to be proactive on adjusting and fixing things before they show up. I utilize Mark because he can turn around and help coach us on how to make sure that we're in compliance and we're avoiding these citations and they end up blending together to some facet. So before we get too far into it, we need to make sure that we understand or we're on the same page with my opinion on what safety is. All right, and it might not be the same as yours, but the good news is I'm the presenter, so we go on my opinion. What's safety?
Follow the right steps.
Okay, but ultimately, what is safety? The right steps for what? To not die? I like it. Huh?
To comply.
Okay, but we said compliance and safety aren't the same thing, so let's pretend we're not talking about compliance right now, because they truly aren't. Just safety. But I like do the right things, because there's a lot there. What else?
Preventing accidents.
Okay, preventing accidents. Are you an accident preventer or avoider? And is there a difference? Okay, to some extent. We'll talk more about that. What about you, ma'am? Or both?
Safety is keeping people healthy.
Keeping people healthy and safe.
In the work environment, as well as to some extent outside work environments so that people have
Okay.
jobs.
Okay, I like that. What else? Did you have something too? You took your idea, didn't you? What else? Safety. Anything else? Throw it out there. Doesn't matter. Common sense. Managing risk. Communication. Don't show up to work. It's too damn dangerous. Give you something. What's the most dangerous thing you'll do? Drive. How much training you get for that?
Nothing.
When's the last time you had training for driving, sir? About 2 years. Okay, so you've gone through defensive driving. When's the first time? Long time ago, right? Did they retrain you like we have to in mining and construction? No? How many people die doing that stuff? That's safety, right? Is it fair to say that when we talk about safety, we talk about killing somebody? If we never kill anybody, will we ever talk about safety? You should, but would you? You wouldn't. Would you? I bet you would based on the comments you gave me. But I can also assure you that the majority of us would talk about it a lot less. We already talk about quality of production way more than we talk about safety. Right? We just do. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, let's just admit it. Safety is a lot of things, and also similar to the screen, it's all kinds of items. And when you take items out of the equation, I drive my car and I drink a lot of beer, I don't wear my seatbelt, the kids are yelling in the back seat, I talk on my cell phone, I put on lipstick. All of those factors contribute to the chances of an injury or fatality, correct? The more I take those risks out, the more likely I'll minimize my exposure. It's no different than what we deal with every day, for the most part, right? So if these things are in here, we understand them, I feel we'll be more successful in our goal. That's what the slide's about, essentially. So, unsafe acts and unsafe conditions is on the top. That summarizes safety to me. Is unsafe acts or unsafe conditions more significant in causing injuries and fatalities, do you think? Is unsafe acts or unsafe conditions a bigger contributing factor to injuries and fatality? What do you think? Is he right? Has he always been right? No. Right? And we're not going to talk a lot about conditions because to me that's more Mark's idea, the conditions being rules and regulations in my mind. But acts are the number one contributing factor to injury and fatality, right? It's people. It's dealing with people. It's dealing with behaviors and taking those factors out of there. So unsafe acts, we're told, contribute to 90 to 92% of all injuries and fatalities, meaning conditions are the rest, or a small percentage are maybe acts of God or stuff happens, right? Tsunamis, right? Those people in Florida, they fell like they're gone, right? They were sleeping in the pole form and they just fell to their death. That would be more like an act of God or stuff happened, right? Nothing that we can really take care of. Why train on that? But unsafe acts we can actually start looking at and trying to break down a little bit. Unsafe acts are people doing things they aren't supposed to be doing. I argue that the people who invented these numbers or came up with these stats on conditions and acts, that conditions is actually even smaller. Let me tell you my way of thinking. If someone dies in a PAMA box, is it a condition or an act? Okay. If someone dies inside of a PAMA box, playing with a PAMA box, is it a condition or an act? He says a condition.
It's an act because it didn't walk out there.
It's an act. If someone gets killed because something falls on that rigging or overhead crane, is it an act or a condition?
What's a
A
condition?
condition? An act. I got a little bit of mixed feeling here. I don't see too many things in our industry that are a direct correlation to someone creating it. The only way you die in a rigging incident, for the most part, is going underneath the load. Don't go underneath the load. It can't fall on you if you're not underneath the damn load. Don't play in a piano box if you're not qualified, certified, as locked up to have the energizer. I can put my 9-year-old in a piano box and give the energizer thing. He will not die. Yes or no? It's very simple. So I can even shrink that up. Housekeeping. Someone had a baby here. For me to slip, trip, and fall on it, someone left a mess. Yes? Fire extinguishers not having monthly inspections. A huge condition we all get cited for a lot. But if someone dies because the fire extinguisher didn't work in an emergency situation, there's a number of unsafe acts that are contributing to that. Is that fair? It's just my way of thinking. So the hard part here that we have to understand is that we are dealing with, in this safety piece, we're dealing with people. And everybody's different. Right? You're still thinking about the 3 kegs of beer. You've missed everything I've said. Quite frankly, I'm still thinking about it. Right? I mean, this is how
Actually,
I work.
I was stuck on putting on lipstick. I didn't know. I'm still
Glad I didn't tell you I loved you. We're going to watch the rest of the day. But think about all the things that we have to deal with in our operations. And the people that work for us have to deal with. And the contributing factors to all this stuff. And the number of people that get killed in automobiles. I mean, this is a big piece. But you're dealing with people. You're dealing with unsafe acts. You're dealing with people. And we have to make sure that we understand that piece of it. It doesn't matter what MSHA does and OSHA does and all of the other policies and procedures. We have to make sure that we can figure out how to get people to stop putting their hands in a live piano box. It's really that simple. Anyone hunt, fish, outdoor stuff? We do. In the North Country, some of us. Those of us that do that, we go through training with our young outdoorsmen, don't we? What's that training? It starts from the day they come out of the womb in my neck of the woods. All right? We were talking about wrestling and firearms and fishing poles the day they were born. And it's never stopped. We talk about pointing stuff in the same direction, understanding your target, making clean shots. I would never put my 10-year-old on watch by himself. One, he's not legal in New York, but I never would do that day one, would you? It starts out with this big. You're training them, you're going over it, reviewing it. Do we do that in industry? Sometimes we say, here's the chainsaw, go get the log out of the woods. Right? There's a lot of factors here that we've got to look at. And when we break it down, we start saying, well, who's at fault with all these things? You know what we got to do is just point our fingers right at ourselves or our supervisors in various areas. So let's explore some of this stuff on the act side, the people side, and how do we manage this stuff. Is that fair enough? That's what we're going to be looking at, is the unsafe acts. So someone mentioned accident. What is an accident? You mentioned accidents. You don't think there's any such thing as them. Right? You mentioned accidents, right? So, who else?
Unforeseen events?
Yeah. Unforeseen event. That's really the definition, isn't it? An unplanned event, unexpected release of stored energy is the definition of an accident. You tell me one incident that's happened at our operation that made a fatalogram that was an accident based on that definition. The guy in the piano box isn't an accident. We do this little thing, and Mark does this, and I'm going to steal it because I like it, is we do this thing called myth busting. Do you like myth busting? You ever seen that show where they shoot cannons and blow up cars and blow, potatoes all over the place? Myth busting, that's what we're doing. We're talking about safety and unsafe acts, and we're talking about accidents. I argue that there's no such thing as an accident. It's a myth, right? It's a myth. Because if the piano box is shut down, no one can get injured or killed. If I leave 12 inches of snow on top of my car and I drive to work and it slides over the windshield and I smash in the back of your vehicle and you die, is that an accident? It's not an accident. It's manslaughter. I left 6 inches or 12 inches of snow on top of my car, it slid over top of my windshield. I committed an unsafe act. I did not follow proper procedures. I did not do what I'm supposed to do to have the responsibility to operate the automobile and you die. It's not an accident. There's no such thing as accidents in our industry. You can actually plan these things. Yes? I can plan on shooting people with my firearm. Or I can take the proper precautions to train my young sportsmen to not do so on mistake. It's that simple to me. So you have to take this accident thing and throw it out. You have to throw it out of your whole vocabulary when you start diving into this stuff. It's not an effective way to look at it. Make sense? Myth busting a little bit. Mark tells me that it's a myth that you are more likely to die in a car crash within a mile of your home. I've heard that since I was this big. Every stat that I've ever seen says that you're most likely to die within close proximity of your home in an automobile. Is that true or false? True or false? True or false? Is it a fair analogy? Is it a fair analogy? 100% of your driving is within a mile of your home. You have to go to and fro every single day. It's not a fair statistic. I flew to Vegas once. I'm not going to do it again. Right? I mean, but I can see where it might be more likely for me to die in a car within a mile of my house for no other reason other than I spend most of my time there. Yes? The only fact that we can come up with is that fat people use more soap in the shower than skinny people, which you've told me that you use more soap. Sam uses more soap than I do. Right. That's a fact.
The difference is there are more fatal accidents within a mile or two of your house, but that's not the most likely place because 100% of some percent of 100% of your driving is right. You gotta leave and you gotta come back, right? If you count your hotel or whatever on top of that, there's no driving essentially that during a day that doesn't include some piece within a mile of your house. So there's way more accidents within a mile of your house, but it's not the most likely place you will get killed. It's a vanishingly small percentage if you do it on a miles driven basis. But it's the biggest number because there's way more miles. And that's the kind of stuff I think in terms of safety when you start to do real analysis and try to really figure out risk management. You have to look into how the myth gets created, and then look at it really critically.
Yeah.
I mean, I can give you a lot more myths too if you want, but it's not like.
I like the myth thing. We have spent so much time as adults teaching adults, and not really looking at how we're teaching adults. Because they learn a lot different than my wife's kids learn, don't they? My kids learn differently than adults. We got to look at those things. This thing that in our head that accidents occur screws with us. Because we say, oh, it was an accident. I mean, there's nothing we could have done about it. Bullshit. I can tell you every single fatality you want to look at, there's things you could be doing to fix that from happening. The good companies do it. You folks here, some of you are doing it. You're analyzing stuff that was a close call. Who the hell analyzes a close call? Geez, I almost slipped and fell. Well, who gives a shit? Well, we do, because this is the reason why, and we're going to share with our sister company, and then they're going to do better at it, and then our brother company is going to do better at it, right? It's a good thing to be doing. But if you think that accidents are occurring, you're going to totally wash that out of your brain. It's just an accident, nothing we could have done about that, and you move on. That's a mistake. There's no such thing as accidents. Every single thing is preventable. And to be honest with you, I don't think there's any such thing as accidents and citations. And again, I won't get on top of your topic right now, but every citation, I can tell you, by standing at your gate, which ones you're going to get, depending on the inspector that shows up. And it's not because I'm smarter than you. All right? It's not because I'm some rocket scientist who can read minds. I just can figure these things out. It's kind of simple. Mark, I'm sure we'll talk about this. But unsafe acts, we got to be looking at understanding that there's no such thing as accidents. You have to make sure that you understand. Just throw that right out of your vocabulary. And this risk thing, see it up here? This red letter underneath safety first, risk. Is risk real? Yes or no? Is risk real? Can we eliminate it? You can minimize it. You can pull out some of those factors or put them in. We talked about it. Put on my seatbelt. Don't drink a 6-pack of beer. Don't get on my cell phone right now. I can take those factors out, or I can put them in, and I can increase my chances of living or dying. But there's still risk, isn't there? Huh? We're making a mistake on trying to minimize risk and exposure. And risk to me, I could spend 4 days talking about. I really could. From our kids. You guys have kids and grandkids at home? You got the plastic things on all the doors so you can't go and play with pots and pans? That's all we had growing up was pots and pans. Now we got to put plastic things on there so they can't play with pots and pans. Are they going to drink Windex all of a sudden more than we did? Maybe that's what we're scared of. What about car seats? How many of those babies we have? 7 of them. Yeah, all kinds of, I got piles of them. Most of my basement right now. 7 of them. We're teaching them how to deal with risk, though, aren't we? elbow pads, knee pads, helmets on bicycles. I mean, what happened to our kids being able to wreck their bicycle and learn that at first scuff up their elbow? Because don't they change the way they do things? We jump pedal bikes, right? Did anyone else jump their pedal bike? Did you crash? Did you figure out a better way to jump your pedal bike? Did you stop? That's dangerous. I was scared to death. No, you kept jumping your pedal bike, but you did it in the grass and the dirt instead of the pavement.
So you got
ways to fix it. It made us better at risk taking. We can't take it all away. A number of our fatalities have been decreased by eliminating risk. Airbags and seatbelts and car seats and no more allowed. You can't ride in the back of the truck anymore. That was awesome to ride in the back of the truck. That's how we went everywhere. Dad put us in the back of the truck, right? I figured out later that was so that him and Mom could connect in the front seat. And we would be bothering them, right? They got a single pickup cab and truck. We got SUVs now. Everyone gets in there on TV. My dad? Nope, single cab. Single cab pickup with a cap on the top. That's where we rode. That was the family wagon. So risk to me is a factor because I'm afraid we are taking some of the risk out of our youngsters and they're going to be coming into our industry. Analyzing risk and making sure that we minimize it though in industry is important. We need to be looking at how we can minimize some of the risk and exposure. I'm not going to discredit that. It's a big factor, but I don't want to make it seem like we can take it totally out of our industry because I don't feel that that's ever going to happen. We have to have ways of managing risk, and we have to have ways of dealing with risk. And we have to understand that the folks coming in that work for us and with us may not have the same ability as you do or you do on analyzing risk. And it all relates to common sense, right? We've talked about common sense. There's no such thing as really common sense. Let's be honest. All of us together have a collective view on this stuff, and we have a level of common sense collectively, but not everybody is of the same barometer when it comes to common sense. So training has to be a factor in here, and retraining. Yes? You have to. If I ever pointed my firearm in an unsafe direction when I was growing up, my dad took it away from me. I got it back after a while, and we tried this again. If I ever pointed in an unsafe direction again, I got it taken away. There was never a time when I grew up that responsibility was ever given to me if I didn't follow that procedure. Period. It wasn't the same with everything, though, was it? It's the same in the workforce. We allow 6-inch wheel grinders to float around the operation with no guards on it and say, well, he's just getting the job done. Right? It's a citable standard. I think that an unguarded wheel grinder, 6-inch wheel grinder, is more dangerous than an unloaded gun pointed at him. There's no bullets in it. I mean, unless I hit him with it, it's not that dangerous. With that little 6-inch wheel grinder, we have this in our head that that's not that big of a deal, but I can take my fingers and point at him and you're itching. I mean, he wants to tackle me. This is nothing. I'm just pointing my fingers here. It's not even a real gun. And you just can't stand that. But I'd be here grinding with a 6-inch wheel grinder probably all day. And you say, that's probably not a good idea. But you keep going. And I don't know if that's the case. But you understand what I'm telling you? We don't analyze risk properly, and we aren't dealing with it. We aren't dealing with it. You got to get better at it if you want to look at actually combating this unsafe acts piece and minimizing some of your exposure in the safety world. It's not just be safe, is it? That's relying on luck. You have to understand some of the key components that are playing a role in it. I will never stand here and tell you that I'm the person that will tell you we have got to do it within compliance every step of the way. Yes? Is that fair? I don't give a shit. Excuse my language. I don't care if you're breaking the law. But I do care if you don't know how to do it correctly. Yes? Is it fair to say you can work on this chair, stand on it, and not die? Is it the correct way to do it? Would you do it if Emmy Roche was here? Probably not, right? So why not make it a better work platform for me? That's a pretty simple thing, right? I've argued that the compliance piece, and Mark said it right at the beginning, that the compliance piece and the safety piece are two very different things. And I understand our need to be compliant because we don't want to get a ticket from the big guy. I got that. But I can tell you right now, we can do a lot of things that are dangerous or not compliant, let's say, but if we minimize our risk and our exposure, we can do it without getting injured or killed. And that's a lot better barometer. I can't tell you how many times I show up in an operation and I say, you come to me and you say, I got a citation for this, what do you think? And I say, well, yeah, it's a citation. Didn't you know that? No, I didn't know that. Well, how did you, sir, not know that that was a citation? Isn't this your operation? How does the MSHA inspector or the OSHA inspector know more about your operation than you do? Right? We talk about some of this stuff, we see this a lot in the industry. The MSHA inspector, the Scott McKenna, and Mark Sata, the OSHA inspector, the insurance group should never come to your company and know more about your operation than you do. If you are on the defensive line and the coach told you they're going to run to the 4-hole, does anyone know football? We go a little bit, I'm not a football guy, but the offensive players are going to come to the 4-hole. How many players will we need to defend them? You watch football, right? To some extent. 4-hole. We know they're going to come to the 4-hole. How many people do we need to defend them? Maybe 3, right? I mean, if we put a couple of us together, they're never going to get any yards. That's the main point, right? We know exactly where they're going to come. With the things that we're talking about, you can actually predict what MSHA is going to be looking for. You can predict what could possibly be an injury or a fatality, and you can eliminate them. Or even, here's another one, you want to play games, he's the MSHA inspector, and you know you got a housekeeping issue over here. Why would you take them there? Why would you take them there when you know it's a violation? It's not a hazard to him because we don't even work in there, right? We have to collect off aisle, it's fine. But in my mind, if you know it's a violation, you also have the ability to play the defensive line and know they're going to the 4-hole. Don't take them to the 4-hole. Or take them to the 4-hole if that's where you got all your blockers. Right? It's very, very simple stuff when we break these things down. But the risk analysis piece is very important. We do it in every aspect of our life, and we're very good at it when we're dealing with our own kids and grandkids. But we aren't so good at it in the industry. And if you truly want to talk safety, treat the industry just like you would treat your child. We ride dirt bikes, we ride 4-wheelers, we shoot guns. Right? My kids go plowing with me, go clean wood. They do all the things that your kids do with you that help bring them up as good citizens in my arena. And in my mind, that's what makes good kids. Good common sense adults. But if you don't focus on this stuff with industry, you're going to fail. Eventually, you're going to fail by not minimizing some of your exposure and risk. So let's chat a little bit more on the condition side and the big bad MSHA and OSHA, because they're really ticking us off in what they're doing, right? I mean,
Yep. Let me ask again, because we've had some people come in since we asked this question. How many of you guys are regulated by OSHA? How many by MSHA? Any by both? Okay, so both. Let me talk about both of these because they're very, very different laws, but at the heart of both of them, they're both very similar at their core, but at the outside, how you cope with them, they're entirely different. And a lot of people make mistakes by treating one like the other or the other like the one. The one that there's by far more people that are regulated by OSHA than MSHA. A lot of people who are in the OSHA arena end up getting regulated by MSHA for something they decide to do, and they treat it like OSHA, and they inevitably end up upside down. But let's talk about accident conditions to start with. This, I can't even hold in my hand, the OSHA regulations. There's 4 volumes about this size. These are the MSHA regulations. These are just the MSHA regulations. The OSHA regulations are another 4 volumes about like this. Okay, about 3,000 pages, 3,200, something like that. These are a mere 800. So, and let me talk to you about these 2 things. Something that was in the survey really rings a bell with me. Both OSHA and MSHA are not, in my judgment, and I used to work for one of them, safety agencies. They are law enforcement agencies. The issue here is there a regulation and did you violate it? And if you violated it, you are liable, right? It's about liability. It's not about whether there was a hazard. When the MSHA, the OSHA inspector says this is a hazard, my answer is, yeah, but it's not a violation of a rule. Right? Safety and compliance are 2 different things, and I can go through a couple of examples about how those really are different. The first one is everybody agreed with Scott that 90% of accidents are caused by unsafe acts, right? Have you had a chance to surf through any of the regulations? of them are about unsafe conditions. The total mismatch from where the causes of the most accidents are. MSHA, this is MSHA rules, MSHA, about 90% about conditions. Okay? They recently came up with a program a couple years ago called Rules to Live By, which is based on some bogus statistics. But what they did was they went through 8 years worth of fatality reports and then looked at the back page of those and saw what regulations were violated, right? So they then assumed that violations of those regs must have caused those accidents. So they said, well, we're going to assess higher penalties for those. We're going to do all this stuff. Number one on the list was failure to wear seatbelts. Is that a condition or an act? Yeah, right? The problem we have here is both MSHA and OSHA were written, the laws were written in a way to make management responsible for everything. So if you have an operator who's not wearing a seatbelt, they're going to tell you that was your responsibility as manager. How many of you get into the cab and make sure you buckle those guys in? How many of you have rules that say you got to wear your seatbelt? Again, nobody's raising their hand. You really don't? Jeez, you gotta have a rule. Okay? Nobody gets in and buckles the seatbelt. When MSHA says you've got to comply with all these rules, 90% about conditions, and then they turn around and tell you that the one that causes the most fatalities is one that has nothing to do with conditions, and one which management has essentially no real role in, right, other than to make the rule and enforce it. Everybody understand that? The second piece I want to talk about with that Scott mentioned is the whole idea of risk elimination, knee pads and helmets and airbags and all that stuff. The current research says that those steps, things like helmets, they surveyed a bunch of motorcycle riders. They said, what's the biggest benefit of helmets? What do you think they said? What? No, they said that you get to ride faster. What do you think they said when they interviewed people and said, what's the biggest benefit of airbags? You don't have to wear your seatbelt. I'm telling you, the current data tells us that the more we try to eliminate risk, right, through some kind of protective device like a helmet or airbag, the more people feel empowered to take more risks. But the laws all ask us to do that. The reason they do and the reason the regulations do that is because the regulations were written 40 years ago. 40 years ago, everybody thought that the way to have an effective safety program was to come up with a bunch of rules and say, don't say this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, and punish people if they did it. That didn't really have much of an effect when we changed to modern behavior-based safety, right? Make a good decision, right? We want to work with you, remember that? Remember that don't do that or I'll fire your ass. Remember that? And now it's like, hey, we need to counsel each other about making a better decision, right? I mean, the first time I ever, but now that the rules were written 40 years ago, the law was written 40 years ago, so the law and the rules all say, here's a set of rules, if you violate them, you're going to be punished. Absolutely not the best way to achieve safety. I am sure all of you have heard somebody say, if you just follow the OSHA rules, or you just follow the MSHA rules, that's not an adequate safety program. Have you heard people say that? Right? So what makes you think that having a good safety program is going to be a good way to comply with all the rules? If complying with the rules isn't safety, right? Then safety isn't complying with the rules. They're two different sets of things. Okay, I can give you a whole lot of examples about how the rules really don't match up with safety issues. Everybody here, I'm sure, has the same issue. The biggest source of workers' comp claims are what? Back injuries, right? Which come from lifting. Can anybody point me to the lift with your legs out with your back regulation in either OSHA or MSHA? That's the biggest source of claims. I don't know if it's the biggest source of injuries, but it's certainly the biggest source of claims, right? There's no such rule. So now, that's really just a plea. That's a plea that says, when you start thinking about safety, and you start to look at ways of eliminating accidents, reducing risk, managing risk, you need to be looking at a different set of things to reduce the risks of non-compliance. It's the same thoughts. It's still the same make a good decision, right? But it's a different set of decisions. And if we had a lot of time, I can go through regs, reg by reg, and show you how these regs require you to do something that's maybe the least safe choice in a number of different situations. So why do I want to comply, and how do I get there? So we have very little time. Why do I want to? First of all, there's cost. Cost of compliance, OSHA or MSHA, is the same. The issue, and how many of you guys have read about predictive maintenance? Where you replace parts before they fail? Or you have to do oil analysis and stuff like that? Right? That's based on the premise that running the part to failure and then replacing it is more expensive than replacing it proactively. So my view is, if you have a compliance issue, a guard is off a belt, a cover is off an electrical box, blah, 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 blah. And it's just a pain, and you have to stop production to fix it, right? Right? The problem is, once OSHA or MSHA comes out and they see it, what are you going to have to do?
You have to think.
Fix it. So you zero out the cost of the fix. If you're doing an economic analysis, you zero the cost of the fix out because you don't have to fix it anyway. And on whose schedule do you fix it after they set you for it? Theirs, not yours. So the idea here is, if you can start to look at the kinds of things that matter to them and get after them early, it's going to cost you less in the long run, right, than it is others. The first thing you're going to do is separate in your head the idea that safety and compliance are the same thing. Well, it covers only off about an inch. You know, I got to send somebody over here and turn it back and tighten the screw, and he's got better things to do. And from a safety standpoint, man, you can't even get your finger in there. But from a compliance standpoint, you have to fix it. And you have to do what else? You have to pay penalties. Right? So you zero out the cost of the fix and add in the cost of the penalty. Everybody's starting to understand this? We spend more time complaining about the agencies than we do trying to figure out how to minimize the risk. That's the issue that gets me. I make most of my money defending people who got themselves in the jail with OSHA and MSHA. And for the most part, we look around and we say, if you'd have been looking at these kinds of things, you would have found it. And the safety versus compliance issue is exactly what I'm talking about. That little cover that's off by a quarter of an inch, you can't even get your finger in there, that's not something we look at as a safety problem. But it's a compliance problem. Right, everybody with me? Now let's talk about cost, and this is the same thing that Scott's going to say about cost. So MSHA shows up, or OSHA shows up, and they give you a penalty, and it's $500, $1,000, or whatever it is, right? Please keep in mind that the penalty you are paying is not a deductible cost of doing business. It is not deductible. It comes out of your bottom line net. So let's pretend that you actually truly all in net 5%. That sound good? Wouldn't that be wonderful? If you really did net 5%. I'm a lawyer, so I can only do 5% now. I can't do 3% now. So, okay? Let's suppose you actually net 5%. That means if you got $50,000 worth of OSHA penalties, and by the way, $50,000 worth of OSHA penalties is not unreasonable these days. That's the kind of penalties they're giving out, right? And you net 5%, how much sales do you have to net $50K? How much? How much? $1 million. $1 million of sales. A $50,000 penalty is $1 million of sales. And you ask yourself, how many pieces of this do I have to sell to net 50K? How many ton of that do I have to make to net 50K? And if, I didn't mean to set up this one.
Now, Mark, I have something that I asked.
Yeah,
You
go
kind
ahead.
of go into it, but realistically on that
scared you, I'm sorry.
on that thought process, I mean, it's really the same when we look at it in the workman's comp field. You pinch a finger, or you break a thumb, or whatever, it's out of your net. It's the same number that caused the injuries and the fatalities. Sometimes the fatalities less than injuries, but then citations is all in that item.
Right. It all comes out of your net. And so, okay, I'm only going to get a $100 penalty. That's okay. So that's $500 worth of sales. That's not really our $2,000 worth of sales, right? 5%. That's not really enough to worry about. Except for what we said, how much is it going to cost to get your guy to go and turn the case cover back and screw it up?
And to throw in one other item, you're only talking about the direct cost.
Right.
Because the indirect costs of everyone at the lunchroom saying, hey, EMSHA's here, EMSHA's here, and then you having to waste time dealing with that, and then, it's like a car crash. Everyone's looking at it, not doing anything. They're not productive.
Right. But I'm not going to move my guy out of production to go do that because I need this production. Right? But $100 is $2,000. There's no way I'm paying that guy $2,000 for the amount of time that it's going to take him to turn it back. There's no way we're going to lose $2,000 worth of production. I mean, there are ways, obviously. If something's busted, you might have to get them to fix it. Something's not working at all. But in the normal course, right, moving them around to handle some of these compliance issues might be the more cost-effective thing you can do. You can actually do hard dollar decisions on this. If it's not a safety issue, you should be doing hard dollar decisions. And when Scott says leading them towards the housekeeping violation, I got to tell you, in the EMSHA world, it's very common to have a 5 or 6 or 8 day inspection. And I always call clients up and say, how did you get a housekeeping violation on the 4th day of the inspection? You didn't lead them there. Unlike OSHA, EMSHA gets to go wherever they want. Well, there's a big pile of garbage. The guy's there, he's eventually going to get to that part of the plant, right? How did you not just send the guy over the shovel? You told me that guy is so critical to the operation, and you know which guy I mean, the guy who's his highest and best use is on shovel, right? He's the guy who says, go shovel that off. Where do I shovel it to? I don't care, just what if it doesn't, what if it's hard to get? This guy works really hard, right? He's the God bless the guy, right? God bless him, tries so hard. That guy. There's nothing better for him to do than to shovel that. And I don't understand this. Despite the fact that that's where my income comes from, I don't get it. I think what's happened is that OSHA and MSHA, especially over the last 20 years, we came to think of them as kind of a nuisance cost. It wasn't a big deal. In the last, let's see, the next election, 2016. The last 6 years, that cost has gone up. Seriously, actually, on the MSHA side, in the last 8 years, it's gone up 500%. On the OSHA side, the number of $100,000 plus penalties we see a year, right, would encompass 10 years ending in 2012. We're seeing huge increases in these penalties. And in order to give you a great idea, a great example of penalties and safety and compliance, let me just talk to you about a recent initiative, and some of you might want to listen to this. In the last 6 months, a CVS drugstore, a Home Depot, and a Forever 21 store, I'm sure you go there all the time, have gotten accumulated $400,000 in OSHA penalty. Why? Because it's astonishing fatality rate for 21, right? right? It's people dying of embarrassment in the dressing room. But are these places you think are hugely dangerous? No. OSHA, in the middle of last year, put together an initiative on safe means of egress. They issued a memo. Okay? It's based on the fact that 100 and some people died in a fire because the exits were blocked in China. And then they go on to reference a chicken processing plant fire in South Carolina from 1995. Right? We haven't had an issue like this in the United States in 20 years. The last major issue of people not being able to get out of fire was in China. But OSHA decided this is a very big deal. So if you have pallets that aren't stacked right, if you have stuff in front of the door, right, and it's just, it's just a pain to move it, right, if the aisles aren't clear, if some doors are locked and they're not supposed to be locked, that's what Forever 21, $226,000 in penalties at 2 individual retail stores.
Whoa.
That's the kind of stuff that would get my attention. If I were paying attention to what's going on at OSHA, I would start making sure the pallets were stacked right. I would start making sure the aisles were clear. I would start making sure there's nothing blocking the exit door somewhere. Those aren't big, huge hazards. That isn't the saw that's going to get you. It's not even the 6-inch grinding wheel. But it's OSHA's violation du jour. And it is costing people, think about that. I'm telling you that $50,000, $1 million in sales, what's $400,000? Right? Plus you got to pay your work, which is fine.
Maybe multiples of 5.
But
In multiples of 5 still.
yeah, right. No, I'm the accountant, so you can pay me way more than you pay. I am a cost of doing it. Everybody starts to understand this. In the time we have, it's just not possible to go through every strategy. But let me give you 3 good ideas about things you can do. The first idea is get some training. Figure out what OSHA and OSHA really work at, really do. Figure out how you navigate the system, because what we see more than anything else is people making arguments about citations that make no sense in the OSHA-MSHA world. Well, they wouldn't have hazard. Doesn't matter. On the MSHA side, was an act of God? Doesn't matter. MSHA is a strict liability statute. It means what MSHA says is that if there's a violation on your property, then you're liable no matter what. Period. Right? So these people say it wasn't my fault. On the MSHA side, doesn't matter. It's a waste of breath. It's a waste of time. That was a technical, tiny little violation. I mean, it doesn't. It's petty. Yeah, it is. And especially now when you look mostly at OSHA, a little bit less at OSHA, but you assume the OSHA inspector knows nothing about what you do. Right? We used to think the OSHA inspectors knew a little bit about mining, but lately they don't. They're hiring a lot more people who have no mining background at all. So those people are extremely good at figuring out whether you punched a hole in the right month on your fire extinguisher, and really bad at figuring out whether the hot wall in the core is going to fall in. They don't. Right? They can't spot a real safety hazard in the pit. They can do really well at punching fire extinguishers. And that's the kind of thing OSHA can do too. They don't know what you do. What do you think they're going to look at? They're going to look at stuff they can count. Right? And where your pallets are. Okay? So you should get some training in what the law that governs you really does. Second, you should be conversant with the rules in a general way. Okay? Third, you should train the people who are actually running the operation, who are on the floor doing the stuff, frontline management, in the economics of violation. You should tell them, I understand it's going to cost us $50 in overtime to get the guy to go fix it, but if they cite it, it's going to cost us $1,000 net, and that's $20,000 gross. right? We don't pay that guy enough money to avoid fixing the problem. What I'm telling you is training, training, and training. If you train your people to understand what they need to be looking for, if you train them in the value of avoidance, right? You know what the lawyer's showing up because I'm very expensive. I'm not making that up with them. I really am. If you call me, hello is $100. Hi, how are you? That's another 100. Okay, how about you? Work to 3, right? You don't want to do that. If you train them in the economics of this, you're dollars ahead. Okay? You also understand how to plan. And like I said, with the limited time, it's very difficult to do. But for instance, MSHA, they get to come in when they want to and they get to go where they want to. OSHA has to have permission to come in and you can limit where they look. Everybody know that, by the way? You have to have your permission and you can lead them the way you want to where they want to go. It's a whole different game on each such moment. Once you understand, though, how those two different laws work, right, and roughly how the regs are constructed, and you start to look at what the trends are, you can start doing a better job of avoiding. I guarantee you the CVS drugstore manager had no idea that stacking the boxes in front of the door was going to cost him $75,000. No idea. I know he would have stacked them somewhere else, or he would have hired somebody overtime to move them. But the economics of it, he just didn't know. Right? I don't think anybody trains the managers at Forever 21 stores on how to avoid $200,000 worth of bill.
I don't either.
I'm sure they don't, right?
They don't. And I can, you can rest assured they'll be doing it now.
Yeah, but the same thing is true. What Scott is saying and what I'm saying is when we need to evaluate risk. They're just two different kinds of risk. They're evaluated in different ways. And we do that if you look at the little bullet up there, it talks about workplace inspection. You can have a formal program or an informal program. The more your people are trained to understand where risk is and how to eliminate it on the safety side, and they're trained to understand where risk is and how to eliminate it on the liability side, I think you don't have to have as formal a program.
I do too, and I'm going to take that a step further on that section because when you look at citations and you look at injuries, just look at them as numbers. Is there anything new in killing people today? Is there anything new in killing people today? My job is very easy. People are dying doing the same stuff today that they were doing 60 years ago. Yes? Is there anything new in citations? Beyond consistency in inspectors and pain in the ass kids, the same pain in the ass kids that are coming to work for you that haven't analyzed risk and been wearing freaking seatbelts all their life and never got a chance to ride in the back seat of my dad pickup truck while mom and dad were up there naked smoking cigarettes and drinking beer. Yes? Are now MSHA inspectors. They're the same pain in the ass kids that are working for us. The citations written are the same now as they've always been. All you gotta do is look at the top 20. Right on MSHA's website. It'll specifically show your industry.
Same with
and
OSHA.
the same on that survey. The same survey that you all put together. And the same with OSHA. We train in our group somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40,000 people a year. We go through this stuff religiously. I'm telling you, the best defense to this is offense. If you memorize the top 20 cited standards, you're down to about 1% of written citations across the country. I'm telling you right now, number one cited standards guarding, there's 680 of them written last year, I think. That's a number that you probably have in the computer software system, but the next one in line was like 300. The next one in line was like 110. You see how much we're shrinking this down? If an MSHA inspector comes out of your plant totally dirty, muddy, pissed off, sweaty, that's a good inspection. Not back in the motel 2 in the afternoon drinking beer after he went fishing for the other 2 hours. And they only get a few hours in before they get paid the whole day. And I'm ranting, but injuries and fatalities are the same now, and citations are the same. So you can figure out what they're looking for and know that they're coming to the four-hole, and either don't bring them there until the last day of the inspection, don't bring them there at all, or fix the damn thing. And the companies that are successful here look at these pieces. The companies that fail here will continue to just complain about it. We find. Too quick. He raised his hand first, so I want to grab
The
that.
list on OSHA of the 20 top problems is on their website under what category?
In OSHA, you can go right down to the point if you're a roofer, a fabricator, you can break it down to SIC code. Just directly, and they...
So you just put it in the search window?
Yeah, you
this
can
is
buy
how
the
you
search
do it.
window. I, by the way, just did a webinar on how do I use the top 10 OSHA violations to find my compliance. And I started by saying you can do that, but the top 10 hasn't changed in the last 15 years. They just changed positions, right? But if you want to set a slide to know, he's got this in.
Oh, okay.
And the preference is, Mark jokes about his cost. If you call him and he wants to charge you, call me and I'll get free information for you. He provides free
Yeah, this
information.
guy just asked me, like, oh, yeah, well, okay, Scott, whatever, you know.
It's the best thing I've ever had. When we go fishing again?
That's
It's
right.
great. But the communication process to us is very important. Internal in your organization, you want to train all of your staff to be as good as the MSHA folks at inspecting your facilities, or as good as the safety professional at inspecting the facilities. You can break it down to a smaller direction. So making sure that you communicate to everybody that what they're supposed to be looking for, and Mark talked about this in this workplace inspection, is very important. You can minimize all of your exposures in the safety and the compliance side by doing so. Workplace inspections are very important. You walk around, you're not racehorses. Racehorses have blinders on because they were going in one direction. We don't do that. We have to be looking at multiple things. That's just how it works. And I know, sir, you had a question too
That
about
was the same question. I was gonna ask if you were gonna show those on the screen.
No, but I will be glad to give him out.
Jane.
You know, in mining, I guess every mine site has to have MSHA training every year for their miners.
Yep.
Is there anything similar in OSHA?
No.
There's no annual retraining stuff. There's some, well, yeah, there are some rules that require special training. The HAZWOP rules require training, but most of them don't. There's no general training requirement.
The bigger issue on OSHA's side on the training, to some effect, is that you're not inspected as often. All right, so there's some other trends that we should chat about in OSHA too, maybe later on during the cocktail thing, but if you're in an environment like you all are, in sawing shops typically, and you've got dust, and then when it's hot out, it's one issue, and when it's cold out, you've got a fog of dust, and there's noise. OSHA's coming. If they look at Cold Springs Granite, or a company that is a publicly owned company, they have a SIC code attachment. It's the same SIC code that's attached to your shop that has 4 employees, let's say. So what they do is draw a happy general geographical area on that SIC code and say, well, let's go look at your shop this year and do a compliance assistance visit. And they're doing this in the bluestone industry now, and they're writing in 6,000 or 7,000 citations, and you have to fix those items. So they're focusing on areas that they have problems with in a bigger arena and coming into you in a smaller arena. Just something to think about. But and that's not 100% my point on some of this, but that is the sure bet way to combat these things. If you look at it just point blank, we know there's consistency issues. They piss us off every day.
OSHA does every year publish a list of targeted industries, and they actually release a list of targeted facilities based on injury rates. I mean, you can tell where you stand on the likelihood of getting inspected. The likelihood of getting inspected is fatality, serious injury, right? For OSHA, for MSHA, it happens all the time, but for OSHA, it's fatality, serious injury, and by the way, the severity of the injury tends to decrease with the level of publicity that you get for having it. So if your plan is way out in the middle of nowhere and some guy stubs his toe, and the local paper says, horrible accident at plant because they don't have anything else to say, everybody in the OSHA is going to read that and show up, right? If you're in the middle of a big city and some guy loses a finger, I mean, you're going to have to report that anyway, but they're not going to show up until you report it because it's not going to make the news. right? Somebody gets one of his legs cut off, you probably know, but so the severity of injury has to do with kind of how it gets reported to MSHA or OSHA, and then employee complaint.
How about if the employee's impaired that gets hurt?
Impaired in terms
Either
of
drunk, drugged, smoking, and the fact is there any defense back for the employer side? Because you go in, you train, you do all this stuff, the employee comes drunk, and you can't go and give a breathalyzer test unless you give everybody, because then you're discriminating.
What state do you live in?
Arizona.
Never mind, I can't do it without letting them know.
you can do random.
You do random, yeah, but
You do random. Actually, if you wanted to, and I've seen this done before, the places that do it strangely enough are generally not in the United States. Right? But I was at a mine in South Africa, and that's a mine in South Africa. So you say, well, we don't have any safety rules, we've got thousands of people here. We're out with the GM and the VP production and the safety, right? And everybody's at the dinner, we're all drinking wine. And we're drinking wine, there's a fourth, fifth bottle of wine is coming. And about 9:15, the GM looks at me and says, you know, when you get to the line, you're going to have to blow in a tube. If you blow more than .02, they won't let you in. And I'm sitting there with my glass of wine, and suddenly they started to go back on the table. And the guy smiles at me and says, we've done extensive research, which means they've drunk a ton, right? If we stop before 10, we'll be okay. But you can do that. You can institute drug-free workplace policy. Even in Arizona, which is a medical marijuana state, our law firm just was involved in a negotiation with the steelworkers, where the steelworkers asked for a clause in the contract that would mirror the Arizona medical marijuana law that says the guy has a card and tests positive, you can't do anything. And we came up with a two-pager about why we didn't have to do that, and we put in a drug-free workplace clause in the contract, and they had to honor it.
We're right to work state, Arizona.
I know, but
So they
some places where they have 8 unions and they represent 45% of the workers, and you know what I mean. But the problem is if the steel workers get that in their contract, and then everybody else is going to want the same thing.
Yeah, but meanwhile, you'll be fined if there's a fatality or whatever, but then...
You will, and now on OSHA, and MSHA you will, because MSHA is a strict liability statute. So if you show up, somebody shows up impaired, no matter how good your program is, then management is always responsible no matter why, so you're going to get penalized, all right? On the OSHA side, there's a defense called unpreventable employee misconduct, which means you have to have a program or a rule that says you can't come drunk. It means you have to teach on the rule, so you have to, not formal training, but you have to reinforce it periodically during the year, which is why you have to have sign-up sheets for your safety meetings, right? And if you use canned safety meetings that your insurance company gives you, and you decide to talk about showing up drunk, you need to write that on there so we all know you're trained on it. And the most important thing is discipline for violation. You have to show that you discipline.
You want some free legal advice, it's going to take your court test.
Well, the thing is that, so there is absolute no defense if you have an issue or a fatality and they're impaired.
And you
No. On the OSHA side, there is. If you have a program...
Only if you have those things.
Right, only if you have those things.
Okay.
But the question I have is, why would you not
No,
have
I
it?
understand. I'm just learning
Right.
this from you because the interesting thing is that implementing it and showing it is one aspect. So in other words, if someone gets hurt and they're impaired, so if someone gets hurt, say their arm or whatever, that means they get killed, but let's say
Right.
they get hurt. Okay, and OSHA comes in and says, well, you didn't do this or this procedure or whatever. And the problem of it is, if they go to the hospital, can you demand a blood test?
It depends on the state whether you can demand. But if you have a drug testing policy, then if the policy says you get injured and you go to the hospital, you sign an agreement that says, I agree to be tested, then you can get them tested. But this is all set up in your drug and alcohol policy.
And there's a lot of pieces to your policy and the procedures on this that I want to get them recorded too. There's a lot of pieces to that. There's a lot of pieces to that you got to look at, and we're short on time, but we can follow up on that whole section.
More than happy to talk to you guys about particular issues like that, either now or where the beer is at 3:30, which Mo needs to talk about, and we're at the end of our time. So
Right, thank you.
The main point with this stuff is if you can get to a point where you're confident, almost to the extent where you're cocky on some of this stuff, where an entry inspector shows up and says, this is a violation, and you respectfully say, I respectfully disagree. We chatted about it among our safety committee. Our certified safety professional came in on it. This is how we understand the regulation, and this is why this is the way it is. At least you're in a position where you're having a conversation about it, and you're not turning around and saying, well, I didn't know. I hadn't been cited for that before. This is how it's always been. Those aren't good mitigating factors.
They're bad because I didn't know means you don't care.
Right.
Right? And if you view talking to the MSHA inspector the same way you view talking to the state trooper, you'll avoid saying the things that we all say to the MSHA inspector. When you realize you were speeding, I didn't know there was a speed limit. Is that going to help you? It's the same as saying, I didn't know there was a rule. Right? It's the same thing. So that's a good rule of thumb. Don't say anything to the inspector that you wouldn't say to the trooper.
And make sure that you understand those components to it. So pretty much everything on that screen we chatted about, other than wife in the shower, and we don't have any pictures of Mark's or my wife in the shower or anybody else's in this classroom. But I have told some of you the story about the wife in the shower, and we'll kind of close with that because it does have something to do with everything that's up here to some extent. And the story goes like this: the wife is getting out of the shower as the husband's getting into the shower, and the doorbell rings. And they start communicating. How does communication occur? You get the door. No, you get the door. I got the door last time. You get the freaking door. You're the man. No, you get the door. You're the woman. Fine, she says. She puts her towel on and goes down and gets the door, right? So there standing at the door is your neighbor Bob. And Bob says, without sticking the meat, I'll give you $600 if you drop your towel. She thinks about it for a minute, analyzing the risk in her head, thinking, no one's around. He's in the shower. $600 is $600. So she drops the towel and stands naked in front of the neighbor Bob for a few seconds. Grabs her towel, puts it back on, takes the $600, scurries back upstairs, happy about her newfound fortune. Right? The carrot at the end of the stick for not complying with a basic rule. Once you're married, you're not supposed to show the neighbor your naked wife. Right? She gets into the shower room and he says, "Who is that?" "Oh, it was the neighbor, Bob." "What do you want?" "Oh, nothing." "Did he say anything about that $600 he owes me?" Now, you're in a little bit of a predicament, aren't you? Because now she's exposed herself. She tried to minimize the risk, but she failed. She thought she had the reward of taking the shortcut and doesn't get it anymore. She's got to cough up the $600. She can't tell her husband what happened, right? Because she should have done it to begin with. The neighbor's going to blackmail her the next time they're at their keg party, which will be like, "Look, I want to see you naked here. I'm telling you about the deal we have." Right? So that's going to make it creepy. It's all just snowballs out of control when you don't start looking at all these key components and you start figuring it out. And the best defense is offense. It's always the best. Even if it's not right, even if it's at risk a little bit, even if it's not compliant, make sure that you know the rules of the game. Don't go to third base before first. Or don't play baseball. Maybe you're better at fly fishing. Right? It's just very simple economics, if you will, when we look at it this way. But hopefully we were somewhat helpful on some thought process. And we're getting close to our time, as Mark mentioned. We feel that there's a lot of components here. We fully understand that entry's a pain in the ass. We fully understand that safety people sometimes are a pain in the ass. We fully understand that you've got to produce a quality product. There's lots of things on our plate. But we also think there's a formula to the madness that'll work. And we spent a lot of time dealing with it and looking at it, both from a lawyer's perspective and a safety guy's perspective, and working with industry folks like yourself. And we're always happy to talk shop. We're always happy. We like working with you folks. We have very little, I have very little interest anyways, and I know you do. I can speak for you. When you're hanging out with a bunch of boring accountants or someone sitting in an office all the time, we like working with construction and mining folks. We like it. So you aren't bothering us when we talk shop. We like doing those things. We consider the mining industry and the construction industry part of our family. We work in it, we play in it, and we like drinking beer with you and working with it.
So we will be interested.
Yeah, so don't be afraid to ask this question. There are lots of ideas, free information that you can rip off and duplicate. Trade your folks. You want stuff, we've got stuff. You want to show us something we're doing, happy to have you. The more we educate you, the bigger of a defense that we have, similar to the committee that's formed that brought us here. If you aren't participating in it, and I think you folks are, there's a lot of people at this seminar who aren't here. If you aren't participating on it, don't come and complain to me. I got lots of things going on, all right? Figure it out. I mean, you gotta get in your surveys, get in your comments. The amount of work that folks like these guys put into doing these things, the amount of time that I alone have been involved with emails and phone calls, I know it's just huge. But if they don't have the resource and information, it's going to do us all very little good. So,
Thanks, guys.
thank you very much.
Just a couple items real quick here for the group. Thank you, Scott and Mark. Great presentation. How many of the folks here in the room presently belong to an association, a Dimensional Stone Association like BSI, MIA, Bluestone Association? Okay. Great. So that means you're also members of the Natural Stone Council. By being a member of our affiliate associations, you're automatically a member of the Natural Stone Council. So you're automatically the people that Monica was talking to previously about getting the survey results in. And if you're not getting those surveys through your association, let one of us know and we'll make sure that happens. Also, when you get ready to leave the room, if you haven't picked this up, here is a Natural Stone Council MSHA/OSHA position statement that our committee has put together. We share this with the legislators in Washington, D.C. When MSHA and OSHA tend to get a little bit out of line, we contact our representatives and senators to make sure they put a call in to whichever agency it is, and this gives them a little background on some of the problems we may or may not be having. It gives you a voice right to Washington to help combat some of this overreach and overregulation that we've been experiencing these last several years. So the survey is important. Your participation obviously is important. We're always looking for members to help on our MSHA/OSHA committee. How many of you are familiar with the new silica rules that are coming down by OSHA? I know you've heard about it probably in the press. It's a big elephant coming at us, guys, and our committee is working diligently, as is the Natural Stone Council, with the Construction Industry Safety Coalition in trying to combat that. We've got an over 100-page brief that the attorneys for that coalition have put together.
We are the attorneys.
Are you? Are you guys doing it? Okay, great. Super.
Construction Industry Coalition.
Yeah. So, again, thank you for coming. Hopefully you found it beneficial. Fill out your little yellow surveys, and it's a table as you leave the room. You just lay it on the table there, and the lady will collect it. Thanks again, guys.